3 years of arriving before dawn, leaving when only security guards' footsteps echoed through empty halls. I thought I was irreplaceable at Belmore Strategies. But that Monday morning, I walked out of the conference room with a decision already made. If they wanted to toss me aside for some inexperienced girl with the right connections, I'd show the entire company what happens when you mistake loyalty for weakness. They'd learn that client relationships aren't assets you can transfer like office furniture. My name is Emily Carver, and at 34, I'd built something I thought was unshakable at Belmore Strategies. That morning, I arrived at the conference room 15 minutes early, as always, my leather portfolio filled with quarterly reports that showed record client retention rates, my rates. The mahogany table gleamed under fluorescent lights, reflecting distorted versions of the faces gathering around it. Gregory Hale entered last, his tennis tan stark against his crisp white shirt. Our CEO had that particular swagger that comes from 3 decades of unchallenged authority. Behind him trailed a young woman I'd seen around the office lately, Sophie Grant, fresh out of Northwestern with a degree her daddy probably paid for and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Team," Gregory began, not bothering with pleasantries. His fingers drummed against the table. A habit I'd learned meant he'd already made up his mind about something. "We're implementing some strategic realignments to position ourselves for next quarter's growth targets." Strategic realignments. In 3 years, I'd learned that corporate euphemisms were just expensive wrapping paper for ugly decisions. Effective immediately, we're restructuring our client management approach. Sophie here will be taking over the Morrison Industries, Hartfield Group, and Brennan Enterprises accounts. He listed them off like items on a grocery list, not relationships I'd cultivated through countless late nights and weekend calls. The blood drained from my face. Those weren't just any accounts. They represented 60% of my portfolio and nearly 40% of the company's revenue. Morrison Industries alone had been ready to walk 2 years ago until I flew to Detroit in a snowstorm to personally resolve their concerns. "I'm sorry, Gregory," I managed, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "Are you suggesting a transition period where I train Sophie on these relationships?" "No transition needed," he said, sliding a folder across the table to Sophie. "Sophie's been shadowing your methods for the past month. She's ready to hit the ground running." That's when I saw him, Ryan, my ex-husband, sitting in the corner seat I'd somehow missed when scanning the room. He wore the same expression he'd had the night he told me about his affair, guilty but not guilty enough to stop what was happening. As Deputy Operations Director, he'd obviously known about this ambush. The wedding ring I'd noticed on his finger last month suddenly made sense. He'd married into Gregory's circle. "The remaining accounts in your portfolio will stay with you, Emily," Gregory continued, as if leaving me the scraps was generous. "We value your contribution to the company." Value. Another word that had lost all meaning in this glass tower. Sophie finally spoke, her voice chirping with manufactured enthusiasm. "I'm so excited to build on the foundation you've created, Emily. I'm sure the clients will barely notice the transition." Barely notice. 3 years of memorizing their kids' names, their coffee preferences, their anxieties about market fluctuations. James Morrison's daughter had leukemia. I'd sent flowers every week during her treatment, paid for from my own pocket, not the company's. Sandra Hartfield called me during her divorce proceedings, not for business advice, but because she trusted me. David Brennan had offered me a position at his company twice, staying at Belmore only because I'd personally assured him I'd always handle his account. "I see," I said, closing my portfolio with a soft snap. "When does this realignment take effect?" "Sophie will begin reaching out to the clients this afternoon," Gregory said. "We'll send a formal transition email from your account to maintain continuity." From my account, they wanted to use my voice, my credibility, to hand over relationships I'd bled for to someone whose main qualification was her father's membership at Gregory's country club. I stood, smooth and controlled, the way I'd learned to move in rooms full of men who mistook composure for compliance. "I'll prepare the transition documents by end of day." That's the team spirit, Gregory beamed, already dismissing me as he turned to Sophie. Now, Sophie, let's discuss your approach to the Morrison Quarterly Review next week. As I walked toward the door, I caught Ryan's eye. He mouthed, I'm sorry. But I'd learned the hard way that his apologies were just punctuation marks, not promises. My hand touched the cold metal of the door handle, and I paused. They thought they were taking my accounts. What they didn't understand was that they weren't stealing business relationships. They were trying to steal personal connections I'd forged, one late-night phone call, one family crisis, one shared victory at a time. Sophie Grant was about to learn that some things can't be transferred with a folder and an email. 3 years. That's how long I'd given Belmore Strategies everything I had. And sitting at my desk after that meeting, I couldn't help but replay every moment that should have warned me this was coming. It started with the Morrison Industries crisis. December, 2 years ago. Their entire supply chain had collapsed due to a vendor bankruptcy. James Morrison had called me at 2 a.m., panic crackling through the phone. I'd driven through a blizzard to my office, spent 18 straight hours coordinating emergency suppliers from my network, personally guaranteeing delays wouldn't exceed 48 hours. When James tried to thank me with a bonus check made out to me personally, I'd refused, saying Belmore Strategies had earned his trust. What a fool I'd been. Then came the Hartfield Group merger. Sandra Hartfield had been ready to pull the plug on our services, convinced we were just another consultancy firm bleeding her dry with fancy PowerPoints and empty promises. I'd spent 3 months essentially living at their headquarters, learning their business from the ground up, not from reports or analytics, but from talking to their warehouse workers, their customer service reps, their night shift supervisors. When I presented a restructuring plan that would save them $4 million annually, Sandra had tears in her eyes. You actually see us, she'd said. The Brennan Enterprises relationship was perhaps my greatest triumph. David Brennan was known for churning through consultancy firms like disposable coffee cups. He'd given us exactly 1 month to prove our worth. I'd discovered his real problem wasn't operational efficiency. It was internal communication breakdown between his old guard executives and new tech hires. Instead of presenting another digital transformation template, I'd organized informal Friday afternoon sessions where both groups could share their perspectives over craft beer and good food. 6 months later, Brennan Enterprises had their best quarter in a decade. But the warning signs had been there, glowing like exit signs I'd chosen to ignore. 6 months ago, I'd been excluded from the annual strategy retreat for the first time. Budget constraints, Gregory had explained, though Sophie Grant, who hadn't even been hired yet, was somehow listed as an attendee under prospective talent. 4 months ago, my office had been relocated from the executive floor to the 14th floor. To be closer to the client services team, the executive floor was where decisions were made. The 14th floor was where decisions were executed. 2 months ago, I'd noticed Sophie shadowing me, but Gregory had framed it as intern training. She'd asked surface-level questions, taken photos of my client files with her phone, recorded our calls for learning purposes. I'd even caught her trying to log into my CRM account, claiming she'd mixed up her passwords. The most insulting sign had been last month's performance review. Gregory had rated me meets expectations, despite my client retention rate being the highest in company history. We need to motivate you to reach even higher, he'd said with that practiced smile. Meanwhile, Sophie had been introduced at the company meeting as a rising star before she'd even officially started. I pulled out my personal notebook, the navy leather one my grandmother had given me when I started at Belmore. Inside were 3 years of meticulous notes. Not the kind you'd find in any CRM system. James Morrison's favorite whiskey, Macallan 18. His daughter's oncologist's name, Dr. Patricia Hernandez at Children's Memorial. His wedding anniversary, March 15th, always forgot it, always needed reminding. Sandra Hartfield's coffee order, oat milk cortado, extra shot, no foam. Her sister's bakery that made the cookies I'd send for her team meetings. Her therapist's recommendation when she'd asked me privately for a referral during her divorce. David Brennan's secret passion for vintage motorcycles, his mother's birthday. I'd been the only business contact to send flowers. His son's struggle with dyslexia that led me to recommend a specialist who'd changed the kid's life. These weren't just details, they were the invisible threads that held million-dollar relationships together. Sophie Grant could have my email signature, my client list, my office even. But she couldn't have the 2 a.m. text from James saying his daughter's cancer was in remission, and I was one of the first 3 people he'd told. She couldn't have Sandra calling me her corporate therapist, or David joking that I knew his business better than his own COO. I looked at my computer screen where the transition email draft blinked at me. They wanted me to write my own professional obituary, to hand over relationships like they were spreadsheets to be uploaded to a new hard drive. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard about the changes. This is David Brennan's personal cell. Call me when you're ready to talk about your next move. Some things can't be replaced with youth and connections. For the first time since that morning's meeting, I smiled. They thought they were replacing me. What they'd actually done was light a fuse. The cardboard box on my desk looked pathetically small for 3 years of my life. I'd arrived early that final day, wanting to clear out before the office filled with avoiding glances and awkward small talk. The 20th floor was still dark except for the emergency lighting, casting long shadows across the cubicle maze I'd navigated countless times. My personal items were few but meaningful. The crystal paperweight James Morrison had given me after I'd saved his supply chain, for Emily, who holds everything together, engraved on the base. A framed photo from the Hartfield Group's company picnic where Sandra had insisted I join their family photo because you're more family than consultant. The coffee mug from Brennan Enterprises with World's Most Persistent Strategist printed on it. David's joke after I'd called him 17 times in one day to close a critical deal. But the most precious item sat in my hands now, my navy leather notebook. 3 years of relationship capital that couldn't be transferred, downloaded, or taught in a shadow session. I ran my fingers across its worn cover, feeling the indentations of hundreds of pages of notes written during calls, meetings, dinners, and crisis sessions. Starting early as always. I looked up to find Marcus from IT standing in my doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He'd been my silent ally, the one who'd mysteriously had system errors whenever Sophie tried to access my files without authorization. Figured you could use this, he said, handing me a cup. Fair warning, Sophie's been here since 5 a.m., sitting at your old desk on the executive floor, practicing her phone voice. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Thanks, Marcus, for everything. He nodded, understanding more than I'd said. Your personal laptop is wiped from the company network, but I made sure all your personal contacts were exported first. Check your Gmail. After he left, I continued packing. Each item I wrapped felt like removing a piece of armor I'd worn for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. The awards, the certificates, the thank you cards from clients, all went into the box. At 8:45, just as the office was beginning to buzz with arrival energy, Sophie appeared at my door. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. Her smile bright and eager like a child about to unwrap a present she'd been promised. Emily, I'm so glad I caught you, she said, her voice pitched with false concern. I wanted to go over the transition one more time, make sure I have everything I need. I looked at her, really looked at her, 24, maybe 25, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to earn anything the hard way. Her nails were perfectly manicured, not a chip or smudge that would suggest she'd ever stayed up all night manually reformatting a 1,000-page proposal because a client changed their requirements at the last minute. Everything you need is in the CRM system, I said evenly, placing the last picture frame in my box. But what about the personal stuff? She stepped closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Gregory mentioned you had special relationships with these clients. I want to make sure I maintain that personal touch. Personal touch. As if it were a technique to be learned rather than trust to be earned. I picked up my navy notebook, saw her eyes track it hungrily. The personal stuff. Sophie, isn't mine to give. It belongs to them. I slipped the notebook into my purse. They'll share it with you if they choose to, if you earn it. Her smile flickered. That's not very team-spirited. Gregory said you'd provide full knowledge transfer. I've documented every process, every strategy, every contact point in the system. That's the knowledge that belongs to Belmore. I stood, picking up my box. The rest? That was never company property. Her face flushed. You know, Emily. This bitter attitude is probably why they chose someone younger, more adaptable. Someone who understands that business is about evolution, not clinging to the past. I could have responded with anger. Instead, I smiled. The kind of smile I'd learned from watching sharks circle in conference rooms. You're absolutely right, Sophie. Business is about evolution, and evolution has this funny way of revealing who's truly fit to survive. I moved past her toward the door, then paused. A word of advice? James Morrison's daughter just finished her last round of chemo. Sandra Hartfield's divorce finalizes next week. And David Brennan is considering acquiring his largest competitor but hasn't told anyone yet. These aren't just details. They're the reasons they pick up the phone when I call. I saw the panic flash across her face as she realized the magnitude of what she didn't know. Wait, where is this written down? It's not, I said simply. It was earned, one conversation at a time. Good luck, Sophie. You'll need it. I walked through the office one last time, my box balanced against my hip. A few colleagues nodded sympathetically, others avoided eye contact entirely. By the elevators, I met Gregory, who seemed surprised to see me leaving so early. Emily, I trust the transition is complete. Everything Belmore Strategies owns has been transferred, I said carefully. He heard what he wanted to hear. Excellent. I know this is difficult, but you're handling it professionally. The elevator dinged open. As I stepped in, I turned back to him. Gregory, you once told me that relationships are the cornerstone of this business. I couldn't agree more. The doors closed on his satisfied smile. He had no idea that I'd just told him exactly why his decision would cost him everything. 2 weeks into my forced sabbatical, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop when my phone lit up with a call from James Morrison. Not his office line, his personal cell. Emily, thank God. His voice carried that edge I recognized from crisis calls. I need to know, did you change careers to become a comedian? Because this Sophie Grant situation would be hilarious if it weren't happening to my company. I set down my cappuccino carefully. What happened, James? She called my CFO James 3 times during our quarterly review. My CFO's name is Patricia. Then she presented a social media marketing strategy centered around Instagram influencers. Emily, we manufacture industrial cooling systems for data centers. Our clients are IT directors, not teenagers. Despite everything, I felt a pang of secondhand embarrassment. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, James. But that's not even the best part, he continued, his laugh bitter. She sent our confidential pricing model to our biggest competitor by accident, CC'd them on an internal email. We lost a $10 million bid because they undercut us by exactly 2%. My phone buzzed with another call waiting. Sandra Hartfield. James, I need to take this. I'm sorry about. Don't apologize for their mistakes. Emily, we both know whose fault this is. I switched calls. Sandra's usually composed voice was shaking with fury. Emily, I'm about to commit corporate homicide. This child, this Sophie, just asked me if my emotional state from the divorce was affecting my business decisions. In front of my entire board, I closed my eyes. Sandra, She also suggested we pivot to a younger demographic because our customer base is aging out of relevance. Emily, we sell retirement planning services. The calls kept coming. David Brennan texted. She tried to fist bump me in a board meeting, then called me Dave. I've killed men for less. By the 3rd week, the situation had evolved from bad to catastrophic. A former colleague, Lisa from accounting, met me for lunch and spilled everything. It's a disaster, she said, sliding her phone across the table. Look at this email she sent to Morrison Industries. I read it, wincing. Sophie had used emojis. Actual emojis in a professional email about a multi-million-dollar contract renewal. The kiss face emoji after looking forward to working with you was particularly painful. She also told Hartfield Group that their current model was giving millennial burnout and they needed to manifest better synergy. Lisa continued. Sandra Hartfield personally called Gregory and asked if Belmore was now being run by a lifestyle blogger. What did Gregory say? He's in full damage control mode. Took Sophie off the Hartfield account yesterday, but the damage is done. Sandra's already shopping for a new firm. The next piece of information came from Marcus, who called me that evening. You didn't hear this from me, he began. But Sophie just caused a DEFCON 1 situation with Brennan Enterprises. What now? She accidentally sent David Brennan's acquisition plans to the Wall Street Journal. Thought she was forwarding it to Gregory, but added the wrong contact. The journalist called Brennan for comment. The acquisition target's stock jumped 15%, costing Brennan an extra $100 million. I sat down heavily. Even I hadn't expected this level of incompetence. There's more, Marcus continued. Ryan's been appointed as Sophie's mentor to help stabilize the situation. Your ex-husband is basically babysitting her now, trying to undo the damage. The irony is delicious. My phone pinged with an email notification. David Brennan, subject line, a proposal. Emily, I'll be direct. We're terminating our contract with Belmore effective immediately. However, I'd like to retain your services personally. I've already spoken with Harrington and Vale. They're prepared to create a position for you, specifically to manage my account and any others you might bring. Interested? Another email appeared. James Morrison. Wherever you land, Morrison Industries follows. Gregory Hale can explain to his board how he lost 40% of revenue to nepotism. Then Sandra. I've already drafted the termination letter for Belmore. My only question is, where should I send our new contract? Because it's going to wherever you are. I looked at the emails, feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks, validation. But more than that, I felt the delicious irony of the situation. Sophie Grant had wanted my job, my accounts, my professional life. She'd gotten exactly that, except she'd forgotten that clients aren't accounts. They're people, and people remember who showed up for them. My phone rang. Gregory Hale's name flashed on the screen. Emily, we need to talk. There's been some challenges with the transition. Challenges? I kept my voice neutral. Sophie is still finding her footing. The clients are being unnecessarily difficult. They're not giving her a fair chance. Gregory, you told me Sophie was ready to hit the ground running. That she'd been shadowing my methods. His silence stretched out before he spoke again. Perhaps we were hasty. Would you consider consulting for us, just to smooth the transition? The flame of revenge that had been smoldering in my chest suddenly roared to life. He wanted me to save him from his own decision, to clean up the mess while Sophie kept my position and my title. I'll think about it, I lied. But Gregory? Relationships aren't methods to be shadowed. They're trusts to be earned. Sophie's learning that now. So are you. I hung up before he could respond. The fire was spreading, and I hadn't even made my first real move yet. The first package arrived at James Morrison's office on a Thursday morning. Inside was a bottle of Macallan 18, his favorite, and a handwritten note on personal stationery. No company letterhead, just my name, embossed in simple navy script. James, I heard Rebecca finished her last treatment. This isn't about business, it's about celebrating what matters. Here's to clear scans and brighter days. Emily. I'd spent 3 days choosing the right words, making sure nothing could be construed as solicitation. This was personal, friend to friend, the kind of gesture that transcended corporate boundaries. Sandra Hartfield received hers the next day. A box of cookies from her sister's bakery with a note. Sandy, remembered it's almost the anniversary of your mom's passing. She'd be proud of how you've led the company this year. Thinking of you, Emily. For David Brennan, I'd found a first edition of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance at an antiquarian bookshop. David saw this and thought of our conversation about finding balance through motion. No business, just thought you'd appreciate it. Emily. Each gift was carefully chosen, deeply personal, and completely devoid of any mention of Belmore strategies or professional services. I wasn't selling anything. I was simply maintaining friendships that happened to exist with people who ran multi-million-dollar companies. The responses came quickly. James called personally. Emily, you have no idea what this means. Rebecca actually smiled when I told her you'd sent this. She asked if you could visit. Not as a consultant. She wants to thank the woman who sent flowers every week during her treatment. Sandra's email was brief, but warm. You're the only person in my professional circle who remembered. Mom always said the best business relationships transcend business. You proved her right. David's text was characteristic. The book is perfect. Dinner next week. My treat. Bring your portfolio, not your old one, your future one. I hadn't asked for anything, hadn't pitched anything, hadn't even mentioned I was unemployed. But by the second week of my gift campaign, something interesting was happening. My personal phone, the number only a select few had, began ringing with unexpected calls. Patricia, James Morrison's CFO, called me directly. Emily, I wanted to apologize for not reaching out sooner. What Gregory did was shameful. Also, between us. Sophie Grant just suggested we use Comic Sans in our investor presentations because it's approachable. James nearly had a stroke. Then came a call from Michael Hartfield, Sandra's brother and co-CEO. Emily, quick question. Sophie just proposed replacing our quarterly business reviews with vibe check sessions. Is she insane, or am I just too old to understand modern business? How did you get my personal number, Michael? Sandra gave it to me. Said you're the only consultant who ever bothered to learn that we're a family business, not just a corporation with family members in it. The personal touches continued. I sent a congratulations card to David Brennan's son, who just made honor roll despite his dyslexia. The card included a note. Your dad mentioned your achievement. As someone who also learns differently, I wanted you to know how inspiring your persistence is. David called me an hour after his son received it. Emily, he's framed your note. Framed it. Do you understand what you've done? You've made a 13-year-old boy feel seen. That's worth more than any contract. Meanwhile, Sophie's incompetence was becoming legendary. Lisa from accounting kept me updated with increasingly absurd stories. She suggested Morrison Industries create a TikTok dance challenge for their cooling systems. Lisa reported during our coffee meeting. James Morrison's response was so loud, 3 people thought we were having an active shooter drill. Another update. Sophie told Sandra Hartfield that retirement planning was depressing and they should rebrand as a lifestyle enhancement company. Sandra asked Gregory if Belmore had started recruiting from Instagram. But the masterstroke came when I learned about Sophie's biggest blunder yet. She'd forwarded a confidential email thread to what she thought was Gregory's private email, but was actually a client distribution list. The thread contained Gregory's comments about clients, including calling James Morrison high maintenance, Sandra Hartfield emotional, and David Brennan, a dinosaur who doesn't understand modern business. My phone exploded with calls. Did you know Gregory thought I was high maintenance? James asked, his voice deadly quiet. Emotional? I'm emotional? Sandra's rage could have powered a small city. I built a billion-dollar company while raising 3 kids alone, but sure, I'm emotional. David's message was simple. Dinosaur? I'll show him extinction. I didn't have to fan these flames. Sophie and Gregory had doused themselves in gasoline. All I'd done was maintain genuine relationships while they burned bridges with a flamethrower. That evening, I carefully composed individual thank you notes to 20 other clients I'd worked with over the years. Each one personal, each one sincere, each one containing a small memory or shared moment from our time working together. No mention of availability, no hint of solicitation, just gratitude for the relationships we'd built. The foundation was set. while Sophie frantically tried to salvage relationships she'd never had. I was strengthening bonds that transcended corporate affiliations. She had my title, my office, my corporate email signature. But I had something she couldn't access with all the passwords in the world. I had trust, earned one genuine gesture at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Sophie. "I know what you're doing. This is unprofessional and possibly illegal. Stop contacting Belmore's clients." I smiled and typed back, "I'm not contacting Belmore's clients. I'm writing to my friends. There's a difference, but I wouldn't expect you to understand it." Then I blocked her number. The first phase of my plan was complete, and I hadn't even begun to make my real move. The crisis at Belmore Strategies reached its crescendo on a Tuesday afternoon. Lisa called me from the bathroom at work, whispering like she was in a spy movie. "Emily, you need to hear this. Sophie just told the entire Morrison Industries board that their data center cooling systems were giving major HVAC energy and suggested they democratize the thermal experience. James Morrison asked her if she was having a stroke. I nearly choked on my coffee. She said what? It gets worse. She tried to recover by suggesting they pivot to sustainable cooling solutions. James asked her to elaborate. She said they should try ice baths and positive thinking. I'm not making this up. My phone buzzed with another call. Marcus from IT. "Code red," he said without preamble. Sophie just sent Brennan Enterprises' entire financial forecast to their biggest competitor. Again. But this time, she included Gregory's notes about how to manipulate the numbers to look more attractive for the acquisition. That's securities fraud," I said slowly. "That's what the legal department is saying. There's a full panic mode happening right now. Gregory's been locked in with lawyers for 3 hours. The texts from former colleagues flooded in throughout the day. Emergency all-hands meeting called. Sophie's been escorted from the building. Gregory looks like he aged 10 years. Clients are threatening lawsuits." Then came the call I'd been expecting. Ryan. "Emily, please, we need your help." His voice carried the desperation I remembered from when he'd begged me not to divorce him. "We." "The company, Gregory, me. We're losing everything. Morrison's pulled out. Hartfield's gone. Brennan's lawyers are threatening action. 3 other major accounts terminated today. And this concerns me how? Don't be like this. You know these clients. They trust you. If you came back. Came back?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "To the company that threw me away for a nepotism hire who doesn't know the difference between a P&L statement and a Pinterest board? It was a mistake. Gregory admits it. He'll apologize publicly. Give you a raise, better title. Whatever you want." What I wanted was loyalty. Ryan. The same loyalty I gave for 3 years. But you sat in that room, knowing what was happening, and said nothing. I couldn't. You chose not to. Just like you chose to pursue Gregory's friend's daughter. How's that working out for your new marriage, by the way? I hear Sophie's incompetence is becoming quite the scandal in your social circle. His silence told me everything. That evening, I received an email from Gregory himself. The subject line read, "Urgent. Proposal for immediate reinstatement. Emily, I recognize we made an error in judgment regarding the recent restructuring. The client relationships you cultivated are clearly more complex than we understood. Effective immediately. I'm prepared to offer you Senior Vice President title 50% salary increase, full control over client management, written guarantee of position security. The company needs your expertise to navigate this transition period. Sophie Grant has been terminated, and we're prepared to make a public statement about your value to the organization. Please call me immediately to discuss. Gregory Hales, CEO, Belmore Strategies." I read it twice, then forwarded it to my lawyer with a note. For the harassment file. The next morning, the business news broke. Belmore Strategies loses 60% of revenue in mass client exodus. The article was devastating. It detailed Sophie's incompetence, the leaked confidential information, and most damningly, quoted several clients. "We didn't leave because of one person's mistakes." James Morrison was quoted. "We left because a company that would replace Emily Carver with someone so manifestly unqualified clearly doesn't understand what consultancy means." Sandra Hartfield was even more direct. "When you treat relationships like commodities, you shouldn't be surprised when clients treat you like a vendor instead of a partner." David Brennan had given only one quote: "Some mistakes are too expensive to forgive." My phone rang. It was Robert Harrington, senior partner at Harrington and Vale. "Emily, I believe you've been expecting my call. We've had conversations with Morrison, Hartfield, and Brennan. They've made it clear they'll follow you wherever you land. We'd like that to be with us." "I'm listening." "Partner track, your own team. And here's the interesting part. We've received inquiries from 7 other Belmore clients asking if you'll be joining us." Apparently, Sophie tried to revolutionize their accounts too. I looked out my apartment window at the Chicago skyline, the Belmore building visible in the distance. "When would you need an answer?" "Take your time." "But Emily?" "Gregory Hale called me personally, begging me not to hire you. Said you were orchestrating Belmore's downfall. I told him that if one person could destroy his company simply by being themselves while his replacement failed, then the problem wasn't the person who left, it was the leadership who let them go." After I hung up, I opened my Navy notebook one more time. 3 years of relationships, carefully tended, properly valued by everyone except the company that had benefited from them. Sophie Grant had wanted my job. She'd gotten it. And in just 3 weeks, she'd proven what I'd always known. Relationships aren't positions to be filled or titles to be claimed. They're trust, earned in moments of crisis and strengthened through genuine care. The empire was crumbling, and I hadn't had to lift a finger to destroy it. All I'd done was take my relationships with me when I left. Sophie and Gregory had done the rest themselves. The conference room at Harrington and Vale smelled of leather and success. Robert Harrington himself sat across from me, along with 2 other senior partners, as we finalized the details of my new position. The November sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany table where I was about to sign my future. "The terms are everything we discussed," Robert said, sliding the contract toward me. "Senior partner, relationship strategy, your own team of 5, full autonomy over client management, and, this was specifically requested by your incoming clients, no oversight on your methods as long as results are delivered." I picked up the Mont Blanc pen, its weight substantial in my hand. "And the clients?" "Morrison Industries, Hartfield Group, and Brennan Enterprises have already signed letters of intent. They'll transfer the moment you're officially on board." He paused, a smile playing at his lips. "Additionally, 4 other former Belmore clients have reached out. Apparently, Sophie Grant tried to modernize their approaches too. One mentioned something about suggested they use interpretive dance for quarterly presentations." I signed my name with a flourish. 3 years at Belmore, erased. A new chapter, written on my terms. "There's one more thing," Robert added. "Gregory Hale has requested a meeting with you. Through lawyers, of course. He's claiming tortious interference. Let him claim whatever he wants. I never solicited anyone. I sent personal gifts to personal friends." That's what our legal team told his. His lawyer actually laughed when he heard the full story. Apparently, it's hard to claim interference when your own employee destroyed the relationships first. That afternoon, I stood in my new office, corner suite, 42nd floor, a view that looked directly at the Belmore building. My assistant, Karen, knocked and entered. "Ms. Carver, James Morrison is on line 1. Also, there's been a delivery." She wheeled in a cart full of flowers, champagne, and gift baskets. I read the cards. "To new beginnings and old friends, James Morrison." "Finally, you're properly valued, Sandra Hartfield." "Welcome to your empire, David Brennan." But the most interesting delivery was a small box with no card. Inside was a thumb drive. I plugged it into my computer, and a video file appeared. It was security footage from Belmore's office, dated the day after I left. Sophie was at my old desk, crying, while Gregory stood over her, his face purple with rage. The audio was muffled, but I could make out key phrases: 40% revenue loss, catastrophic failure, and how could you be so incompetent? A sticky note was attached to the drive. Thought you'd want to see the immediate aftermath. Consider it a farewell gift. Marcus. I deleted the file. I didn't need to see their suffering. Living well would be revenge enough. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I recognized Ryan's new phone. Emily. Gregory's having a breakdown. The board called an emergency meeting. They're discussing his removal. Sophie's father is suing the company for wrongful termination and defamation. Please, if you ever cared about what we built together, help us. I responded. What you built was a house of cards. Ryan. You chose to replace the foundation with decoration. This is just gravity doing its work. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of activity. My new team was assembled, sharp, hungry professionals who understood that relationships were about depth, not breadth. We set up our systems, our processes, our philosophy, earn trust through presence, maintain it through consistency, strengthen it through genuine care. The official announcement went out on Thursday. Harrington and Vale welcomes Emily Carver as senior partner, relationship strategy. Within hours, the business press picked it up. Belmore's lost star rises at competitor. The article mentioned the client exodus, the revenue loss, and included a particularly damning quote from an anonymous Belmore employee. We traded a thoroughbred for a show pony, and now we're surprised the race is lost. Friday afternoon, as I was preparing my first client presentation for Morrison Industries at H&V, Karen knocked again. Ms. Carver, there's someone here to see you. Sophie Grant. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. I considered refusing, then curiosity won. Send her in. Sophie entered, and I barely recognized her. Gone was the confident, designer-clad nepotism hire. She looked exhausted, defeated, her eyes red-rimmed. I know you hate me, she began. I don't hate you, Sophie. I nothing you. That seemed to hurt more than hatred would have. I wanted to apologize, she continued. I thought I knew what your job was. I thought it was about presentations and strategies and making clients feel important. I didn't understand it was about actually caring. And now? Now I'm unemployable in this industry. My father's connections can't fix this. Gregory made sure everyone knows I'm the one who lost 60% of his revenue. She pulled out an envelope. This is a letter of apology to your clients. I wanted you to see it before I sent it. I read it. It was honest, brutal in its self-assessment, and surprisingly mature. Send it, I said. It won't fix anything, but it's a start. She stood to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, you were right. Relationships aren't something you can inherit or steal. They're earned. After she left, I stood at my window, looking at the city below. The Belmore Building's logo was still visible, but I'd heard rumors they were considering a rebrand. Too much negative association. My phone rang. Morrison Industries. Emily. We're ready to sign the contract with H&V. One condition, though, you personally manage our account. No substitutes, no shadows, no strategic realignments. Just you. Just me. I agreed. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and amber. 3 weeks ago, they'd tried to replace me, to transfer my relationships like data files. Now, I stood in a better position, with better terms, and most importantly, with the validation that what I'd built couldn't be copied, transferred, or replaced. The empire I'd helped build at Belmore was crumbling, but from my new perch at Harrington and Vale, with my clients following by choice rather than contract, I was building something better, something truly mine. The call came on a Friday evening, 3 months after I joined Harrington and Vale. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Karen knocked. Ms. Carver. Gregory Hale on line 1. He says it's urgent. I let him wait for 30 seconds before picking up. Emily. His voice had lost all its CEO bravado. He sounded tired, defeated, old. Gregory. I'll cut to the chase. The board has given me 30 days to recover 40% of our lost revenue, or I'm out. My own company, Emily. 20 years building it, and they're ready to throw me out. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. We need you back, he continued, the words seemingly choking him. Not Sophie, not anyone else. You. Name your terms. Equal partnership if you want it. Your name on the building. Whatever it takes. I leaned back in my leather chair, looking at the awards already accumulating on my wall at H&V. 3 months. And I'd already brought in more revenue than most partners managed in a year. Gregory, do you remember what you told me when you gave my accounts to Sophie? You said business was about evolution, about adapting to new dynamics. That was a mistake. No, you were right. Business is about evolution, and sometimes evolution means extinction for those who can't adapt. Emily, please, I'm begging you. You're asking me to leave a senior partnership where I'm valued, where my clients followed me by choice, where I have autonomy and respect, to return to a company that discarded me like outdated software. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You sat in that conference room and transferred relationships like they were Excel files. You thought client management was about face value and connections rather than trust and genuine care. What do you want? An apology? You have it. A public statement? I'll take out a full-page ad in the Tribune. Money? Name your number. I stood and walked to my window, looking down at the city 42 floors below. The Belmore building was visible in the distance, its logo dim in the evening light. What I want, Gregory, is something you can't give me. The 3 years I invested in building something I thought mattered to you as much as it mattered to me. But you taught me a valuable lesson. Loyalty to a company is worthless if the company has no loyalty to you. So that's it? You're just going to let Belmore burn? I'm not letting it do anything. You lit the match when you chose nepotism over merit. Sophie poured gasoline on it with her incompetence. I'm just watching natural consequences unfold. This is your revenge? No. Gregory. Revenge would be if I actively destroyed you. This is just me living my best life while you deal with your choices. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. The clients? They still ask about you. James Morrison told me I was the stupidest CEO in Chicago for letting you go. Sandra Hartfield said I deserved everything that happened. David Brennan just laughed when I called him. They're good people. They deserve partners who value relationships as much as they do. And Ryan. Gregory's voice carried a different note now. He lost his position yesterday. The board blamed him for not warning me about Sophie's incompetence. His new wife left him when his income dropped. Funny how quickly things fall apart. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not sympathy. Ryan had made his choices. I have to go, Gregory. I have a dinner meeting with a new client. Actually, one of your former clients. They called me directly last week. Which one? Does it matter? They're all leaving eventually. Not because I'm taking them, but because you showed them who you really are. A man who sees relationships as commodities and people as replaceable parts. Emily. Goodbye, Gregory. I hung up and returned to my desk. My phone immediately lit up with a text from James Morrison. Heard Gregory called you. Please tell me you didn't cave. Never, I responded. Good. Because I have 7 other companies who want to meet you. Real businesses who understand that relationships are everything. I smiled, closing my laptop. 3 months ago, they'd tried to erase me, to prove I was replaceable, that everything I'd built could be handed over like a set of keys. Instead, they'd learned that some things can't be transferred, downloaded, or taught in shadow sessions. Trust is earned in moments of crisis when you show up without being asked. Loyalty is built through consistent presence, not contractual obligation. Real relationships survive institutional changes because they were never institutional to begin with. I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. In the lobby of Harrington and Vale, a new portrait had been added to the wall of partners. Mine. The plaque beneath it read, Emily Carver, Senior partner, relationship strategy, building bonds that transcend business. As I stepped onto the street, my phone buzzed with one final message. It was from Sophie. Saw the news about your latest client win? Congratulations. Thank you for teaching me the difference between having a position and earning a place. I deleted the message and hailed a cab. The Belmore building disappeared in the rearview mirror as we drove toward my dinner meeting. I didn't look back. When you're building something new, something better, something truly yours, you don't have time to watch the old world burn. The relationships weren't mine to take or theirs to give. They belonged to the people who'd trusted me, and they'd chosen to continue that trust. That wasn't revenge. That was just loyalty returning to where it was valued. My phone lit up with new messages, new opportunities, new beginnings. This was my empire now, built on genuine connections, not corporate hierarchies. And unlike my position at Belmore, this couldn't be strategic realigned away. I smiled, watching the city lights blur past. They'd wanted to replace me. Instead, they'd freed me. And in trying to take everything, they'd lost it all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this revenge story, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Emily's situation? Let me know in the comments.